The cold wind bites at Lily's face as she hurries down the city street, the usual hum of cars and chatter fading into a blur. She pulls her worn jacket tighter around her, clutching the last dollar she has in her pocket. A single, crumpled bill that feels like the weight of everything she's lost. It's just $1, but to her, it might as well be a lifeline. She passes the homeless man again, sitting quietly on the corner with a sign that simply says, "Anything helps." Their eyes meet for a moment, and something unspoken passes between them. She looks down at her shoes, sighs, and then, almost without thinking, she pulls the dollar out and hands it to him. She doesn't know it yet, but this small act will change everything. And this, Lily thinks, is the one thing she's done right in days. But little does she know, it's just the beginning of a story far beyond anything she could ever imagine. The cafe was nearly empty, a rare lull in the middle of an otherwise busy day. Lily wiped down the counter for the third time, the same streak of water running down the stainless steel, as if she could scrub away the weight of her exhaustion. She glanced at the clock, almost time for her shift to end, but the thought barely gave her any relief. The clock had never been on her side. Her hands moved mechanically, swiping the rag over the surface while her mind wandered to all the things she needed to do. Rent was due, bills were stacking up, and she hadn't seen her younger brother, Noah, in weeks. He was slipping, she could feel it. But what could she do? She barely had enough for herself. "Lily, could you grab me another batch of caramel sauce?" Her manager, Greg, called from behind the register, his voice sharp, like it always was when he was in a mood. She nodded and quickly moved to the back, the cold air from the freezer a brief but welcome distraction. Her hands fumbled with the jar, the sticky, sweet scent of caramel filling the space. "Can you get it together, Lily?" Greg's voice cut through the silence, more annoyed now. "You're falling behind, and it's not just me noticing." Lily froze, the jar still in her hand. Her heart sank into her stomach. I'm sorry, Greg. I'll fix it." She could feel his eyes on her, but she didn't look up. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. His words weren't new, but they still stung. She squeezed the jar tighter, trying to focus on anything but the tightness in her chest. Greg sighed and walked off, muttering under his breath. Lily set the jar down with more force than necessary. She felt the burn of tears behind her eyes, but she blinked them away. No time for that now. She couldn't afford to fall apart. Not today. Not ever. Her shift dragged on, the seconds ticking by like hours. She smiled mechanically at the few customers who came through, the same scripted responses pouring from her lips. "Can I get you anything else? Have a nice day." But inside, it was like she was disappearing a little more with every exchange. She didn't know what was worse, the way she felt invisible, or the way she felt trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. Finally, the bell above the door jingled, signaling the arrival of a customer. Lily looked up automatically. Her heart skipped when she saw him, the older man, sitting on the sidewalk just outside the cafe. He was hunched over, his dirty baseball cap pulled low over his face, but she recognized him from the other day. Something about him felt different this time. There was a quiet dignity about him, even in his ragged clothes. His eyes, though mostly hidden, seemed to carry the weight of years. And for a second, Lily's mind flashed to Noah, his troubled face, his reckless choices. She didn't know what made her walk over, but before she knew it, she was out the door, stepping into the cold air. The man looked up as she approached, and she felt a flutter of nerves. She wasn't sure why she'd walked out here. She didn't have anything to give. Not really. But when her eyes fell on him again, something inside her made the decision for her. She reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing the crumpled bill at the bottom, the last of her money. The last dollar. I know it's not much, but she hesitated, her voice softer than she intended. "Here, I hope it helps." She held it out to him. His gaze softened, and for a second, the world around them quieted. He reached for the dollar, his hand slow, deliberate. When he took it from her, he gave her a nod of gratitude. "Thank you." Lily's heart beat a little faster, but she couldn't tell if it was from the cold or the rush of emotion she suddenly felt. She pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, ready to leave, but his voice stopped her. "You've got a good heart," he said, his voice low, gravelly, but warm. Don't let the world change that. Lily paused, her hand still on the door, looking back at him. She didn't know why, but something in his words made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. She wanted to say something, anything, but she couldn't find the words. Instead, she just nodded and walked back inside, the door closing softly behind her. As she returned to the counter, the weight of her decision lingered in the air like the last breath of a storm. She couldn't explain it, but she felt different now. For a brief moment, she wasn't just the girl with nothing left. She was someone who had done something kind, and maybe that mattered more than she realized. The cafe buzzed with a low hum of conversation as Lily wiped down the counter again, the repetitive motion almost soothing. She could hear the whir of the espresso machine behind her, the clink of cups and spoons. Everything felt ordinary again, like the world had reset and she could go on pretending it was all okay. But it wasn't okay. Not really. The door chimed as a customer walked in, and Lily greeted them with her usual smile. She took their order, her movements automatic, but her mind drifted. The homeless man. She couldn't stop thinking about him. His face, the quiet gratitude in his eyes, it all stayed with her. For some reason, it felt like more than just handing out spare change. Maybe it was because she hadn't expected anything from him in return. Maybe it was because she had nothing else to give, and yet she did. She sighed quietly, leaning against the counter. The bell above the door jingled again, this time a familiar voice calling out to her. "Lily, could you grab me a fresh pot of coffee?" Greg's voice was sharp as usual. He was always in a hurry, always demanding more from her than she had to give. She grabbed the pot and turned to fill the customer's cup, then returned to the back to grab more coffee beans. Her hands shook just slightly as she measured them out. She wasn't nervous. It wasn't that, but something about the weight of the day, the pressure of the bills, the worry for Noah, it all felt too heavy. When she returned to the front, Greg was still watching her, arms crossed, tapping his foot impatiently. "You're slow today. What's going on?" Lily forced a smile, doing her best to keep the frustration out of her voice. "I'm just getting a little tired, Greg. It's been a long week." "Get it together then," he snapped, and turned away without another word. Lily felt the heat of embarrassment rise in her chest. She wasn't good enough for him. She wasn't good enough for anyone. She tried to shake off the sting, forcing her focus back to the counter, back to the customers, the orders. But it wasn't just Greg. It was everything. The constant pressure to perform, the failure she felt at home, the fear for Noah. It all crushed down on her like a weight she couldn't escape. Just as she began to lose herself in the quiet chaos of the cafe, the door jingled again. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The older man from the corner, he was back. Her heart did something strange, a little flip, as she watched him settle into his usual spot near the window. He sat with his back straight, his old coat pulled tightly around him. His eyes were closed, and for a moment he looked like he was meditating, or maybe just trying to block out the world around him. Lily wasn't sure why, but she felt an urge to go to him again, to do something. The last dollar she had given him hadn't felt like a decision, it had felt right. But now she wondered if there was more to it. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the door, the familiar chimes sounding again as she stepped outside. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and bitter, but she didn't care. The man opened his eyes when she stood in front of him. He recognized her instantly, and a slow, tired smile spread across his face. "You," he said, nodding as though it was an answer to something unsaid. Lily hesitated, unsure of why she had walked out there. She still didn't have anything to offer, nothing tangible, at least. But something about him felt different. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like he saw something in her she hadn't even seen in herself. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice uncertain, her words stumbling over themselves. "You've been here a lot lately. I'm fine," he interrupted gently, his voice raspy but kind. "I've seen you too. You've been struggling, haven't you?" Lily felt a pang in her chest. Her face flushed slightly, a mix of embarrassment and the surprising honesty of his words. She wanted to brush it off, pretend he was just another person on the street, but she couldn't. Not now. not with the way he was looking at her, the way he spoke like he truly understood. "I'm trying," she said quietly, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "But it feels like nothing's ever enough, you know? Like no matter what I do, I'm always just barely keeping my head above water." He studied her for a moment, as though weighing her words. Then, as if deciding something, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled bill. "This," he said, handing it to her. "It's not much, but it's something." Lily stared at the bill in his hand, then back at him. She felt the words catching in her throat, unable to make sense of what was happening. "I don't need your money," she said, though it came out more like a question than a statement. She'd never expected him to offer anything. The last thing she needed was to take something else from someone else. But he was insistent. "I'm not offering it as charity," he replied softly, his voice steady. "I'm offering it because I see you. You've got something. More than you know." Lily's heart raced, but it wasn't from fear. It was something else, something that felt like hope, but hope had always felt so far away. She didn't know what it was, but she could sense it. Something was shifting. She looked down at the bill in her hand, then back at him. For the first time in a long while, she felt like someone had noticed her. Not just as another face in the crowd, but as Lily, someone who mattered. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just remember that you're worth more than you think." He gave her a soft, knowing smile, then settled back against the wall, his eyes drifting shut once more. And for the first time, Lily didn't feel so alone. The next few days dragged by in a blur of coffee orders, half-hearted conversations, and quiet moments of guilt that gnawed at Lily. She hadn't seen the man since that day, but his words stayed with her, echoing in the back of her mind. "You're worth more than you think." Every time she reached into her pocket, she thought about the crumpled bill he had offered her. It felt like a promise, or maybe a reminder, though she wasn't sure what for. Her shifts had become a blur of busy mornings and late nights. Greg's constant criticism weighed on her, his voice growing louder with every mistake. "Lily, this is unacceptable. You're not keeping up," he barked one afternoon, the frustration in his tone leaving her with a tight knot in her stomach. She tried to explain, but he waved her off. "You need to focus, or you'll be out of here faster than you came in." Her heart sank. The words stung, but the truth behind them hurt even more. She was barely holding it together. It wasn't just the job, it was everything. Noah was still lost to her, still spiraling down a path she couldn't pull him out of. She had no answers for him, no solutions. And every day that passed felt like another day she was failing him. Later that evening, after closing time, Lily stood at the counter, cleaning up, her mind a swirl of guilt and exhaustion. The dim light from the overhead bulb cast long shadows, and she didn't even notice how much time had passed until Greg's voice broke through her thoughts. "You need to go home, Lily," he said, his tone softer now, but still with an edge of irritation. "We'll talk tomorrow, but I need you to step it up." Lily nodded, too tired to argue, and grabbed her bag. The cold hit her like a slap when she stepped outside, the biting wind a stark contrast to the warm interior of the cafe. She wrapped her scarf tighter around her neck, her breath fogging in front of her. The street was quieter than usual, the hum of the city subdued in the late hour. She made her way down the sidewalk, passing familiar faces, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her chest. As she rounded the corner, she saw him again, the homeless man. He was sitting in the same spot, but this time there was a new calmness in the way he sat. He wasn't hunched over like before. Instead, he leaned back against the wall, his eyes half closed, his hands resting in his lap. For a second, Lily hesitated, unsure why she felt so drawn to him. She stood there for a moment, watching him. Her heart gave an unexpected lurch. She had no more money to give him. She had nothing left. But something in her stirred. Maybe it was the heaviness of her own life weighing on her. Or maybe it was just the need to do something good for someone else. Without thinking, she stepped closer. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice tentative. The man's eyes opened slowly, and when they met hers, she saw something different, something warmer. A glimmer of recognition. "I'm fine," he said, his voice rough but kind. "How about you?" Lily shifted uncomfortably. "It's just, Everything feels like it's falling apart. Her words tumbled out before she could stop them. She wasn't sure why she was telling him this, but for some reason it felt easier to talk to him than it did to anyone else. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze steady. "You're not alone," he said quietly, "even when it feels like it." Lily blinked, surprised by the simple truth of his words. She had been feeling alone for so long, like no one noticed the cracks inside her. But this man, this stranger, seemed to see through it all. "I just don't know how to fix anything," she whispered, the weight of everything hitting her again. The bills, her brother, the job. "I don't know what to do anymore." He leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't have to fix everything all at once. You just have to take it one step at a time." Lily nodded, but the words didn't sink in at first. She wanted to believe him, but it felt impossible. She had spent so long trying to fix things, trying to make everything okay. And the weight of her failures pressed on her chest like an anchor. The man seemed to sense her hesitation. "Life doesn't work in big fixes," he said gently. "Sometimes it's the small acts, the quiet moments, that change everything." Lily let out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for all of this." "You are," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You're stronger than you think." There was something about the way he said it, something in the quiet confidence in his eyes that made her feel lighter. Not entirely free, but like the weight of the world wasn't quite so crushing. She didn't know why he cared. He didn't know her anything. But in that moment, his kindness felt like a thread pulling her towards something she hadn't realized she'd been missing: hope. Lily finally turned away, feeling a little less burdened than before. As she walked back to her apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside her. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next morning, Lily woke up late again. Her alarm had failed to go off, and the light streaming through her window told her she was already behind schedule. She jumped out of bed, quickly dressing in the same worn jeans and flannel shirt she wore every day. Her reflection in the mirror looked tired, even before she'd had a chance to fully wake up. It wasn't just the exhaustion from work, it was the weight of everything. The job, Noah, the uncertainty of her future. She barely had time for breakfast before rushing out the door, her mind running through the things she still needed to do. The moment she stepped outside, the cool air hit her like a slap, but something about it was refreshing. It reminded her that today was a new day. As she made her way to the cafe, her thoughts returned to the man from the street corner. There was something in the way he had spoken to her, something different about him. She couldn't explain it. He was just a stranger, after all. But his words had stuck with her. Maybe it was the way he spoke with such certainty, like he knew exactly what she needed to hear. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was more than just a homeless man. The usual rhythm of the cafe greeted her as she entered, the warm smell of coffee filling the air, the familiar hum of conversation. Greg was already at the counter, barking orders at the staff as he always did. But Lily's mind was elsewhere. She was lost in thought, replaying the conversation with the man over and over in her head. "Lily, what's taking so long?" Greg snapped, pulling her back to reality. "Get moving." She nodded, trying to push the lingering thoughts aside, and dove into the work that needed doing. But the nagging feeling remained. Was she missing something? Was she supposed to do more for him? For herself? Around noon, as she cleaned up the counter, the door jingled again and Lily glanced up. It was him, the man from the corner. This time, though, there was something different about him. He wasn't hunched over like he usually was. Instead, he stood tall, his jacket pressed and his posture straight. It took her a moment to fully recognize him, but when their eyes met, her heart skipped a beat. He was different, clean even. His eyes, the same deep blue from before, seemed sharper now, almost calculating. Lily froze for a second, unsure of what to do. She hadn't expected to see him like this. What was he doing here? He smiled at her, that same kind, knowing smile from before. "I think we need to talk, don't you?" he said, his voice calm and steady. Lily's throat went dry. She wasn't sure if she should approach him or stay behind the counter. She felt nervous, confused, but there was something undeniably magnetic about him. Something that pulled her in, even though she didn't know why. Sure, she replied, a little hesitant. What are you doing here? He walked closer, the lines of his face softening. I thought I might stop by. See how you're doing, he said simply. How's everything? Lily blinked, taken aback. You're asking about me? She chuckled nervously. Why would you care? He studied her for a long moment. Then his expression shifted slightly. Because I see you, he said quietly, the words hitting her like a wave. And I know what it feels like to be invisible. She didn't know how to respond to that. She wanted to say something that would make sense of all this, but instead, she found herself just staring at him. Why are you here? She finally managed to ask. He chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. You still don't know, do you? Know what? His smile faded slightly, his eyes narrowing with intent. You've been looking at your life from the wrong angle, Lily. You think that what you're doing here, that this is all there is. But it's not. Lily blinked. She felt like she was in a fog, trying to catch up with his words. But the more he spoke, the more unsettled she became. What do you mean? She asked, almost desperately. He paused for a moment before replying, his voice softer now. I'm not just some random guy on the street, Lily. I'm someone who's been watching you for a long time. Her stomach dropped, her mind racing. Watching me? Why? Because I've been waiting for the right moment to step in, he said, his tone serious, but not cold. And now here we are. Lily felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just a random conversation. It wasn't just some stranger offering her words of encouragement. There was something more here, something she wasn't seeing. Before she could process what he was saying, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope, the thick paper a stark contrast to the weathered look of his jacket. This is for you, he said, handing it to her. She hesitated, staring at the envelope. Something in her gut told her not to take it, but her curiosity overpowered her hesitation. Slowly, she reached out and took it from his hand. The paper felt strangely smooth under her fingers. You'll know what to do with it, he added, his eyes locking with hers once more. Lily looked up at him, a mix of confusion and dread swirling inside her. She opened her mouth to ask more questions, but he was already turning away, stepping toward the door. Wait, she called out, but he didn't stop. He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. You'll understand soon enough, he said softly, then disappeared into the street, leaving her standing there, the envelope heavy in her hands. Lily stood in the middle of the cafe, the envelope still clutched in her hands. Her heart raced, the quiet stillness around her amplifying the unease that crept up her spine. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him, whoever he was, to drop something so heavy into her lap. What was this about? Why had he given her this? The man, or Henry, as she had learned from a quick glance at the return address, seemed to know far too much about her life, about her struggles, about her exhaustion, and most disturbingly, about her sense of invisibility. Lily slowly walked behind the counter, the world around her quiet but growing larger, more suffocating with each step. She set the envelope down on the counter, her fingers lingering on the smooth surface as if it might burn her. Lily, you okay? Greg's voice broke through her thoughts, and she looked up to find him staring at her with a raised eyebrow. She quickly shoved the envelope into her apron pocket, shaking her head to clear the fog. Yeah, fine. Just distracted. Greg muttered, clearly unconvinced, but he turned back to the front of the cafe, leaving her to her own thoughts. Lily's mind raced. She knew she couldn't keep this envelope hidden forever. She had to open it, had to figure out what was inside, even though a part of her was terrified of what it might mean. She'd seen enough bad news to last a lifetime, and the last thing she needed was another crushing blow. But this didn't feel like bad news. No, there was something strange about it all. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled the envelope from her apron and carefully peeled it open. Inside was a thick, folded piece of paper, letterhead embossed with what looked like the name of a company. Lily's brow furrowed as she unfolded it. Dear Miss Lily McAllister, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a candidate for an opportunity to participate in a community development project led by our foundation. This project aims to offer a stable, fulfilling career path, mentorship, and resources to individuals from all walks of life. We believe your unique background and perspective would be a valuable addition to our team. Please find attached an invitation to meet with our project coordinator for an initial interview at your earliest convenience. We look forward to the possibility of having you join us. Sincerely, Henry Calloway, founder, Calloway Enterprises. Lily's breath hitched in her chest, her mind struggling to process what she was reading. She knew the name. Calloway Enterprises was one of the wealthiest, most influential companies in the country. It was the kind of name that you saw on skyscrapers, on news headlines. The kind of name that seemed so far out of reach. It might as well have been a fantasy. But there it was, an invitation from Henry Calloway himself. Her first instinct was to laugh it off, to crumple the letter and throw it away. This had to be a mistake. She didn't belong in a world like that. She was a barista. She was just barely getting by. She didn't fit in with people like Henry Calloway. He was the man who helped fix problems, not the one who needed help. But then her fingers tightened around the paper. A cold, terrifying thought gripped her chest. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if he really was offering her a chance? Lily, Greg called out again, and she quickly stuffed the letter back into the envelope and tucked it away. She forced a smile and nodded, trying to act casual, but the weight of the envelope was heavy in her pocket. She could feel it, like a second heart beating against her side. Greg was standing at the counter now, tapping his fingers on the surface impatiently. Stop zoning out. I need you to clean the back fridge before you leave. Right. I'll get to it, she replied quickly, avoiding his eyes as she turned away. Her heart was still pounding, her mind swirling. She couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Henry Calloway, the man she had helped just days ago. The man who had said she had more to offer than she realized. The man who had made her feel, for just a moment, like she wasn't invisible. But was this real? Was it possible? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lily went through the motions, serving customers, cleaning up, and pretending to be fine. But all she could think about was the envelope, the letter, and the strange, unsettling feeling that had settled deep in her chest. She had always thought that the world was divided into two parts, the haves and the have-nots. She was part of the latter, always scrimping, always struggling, always watching as others live lives she could only dream of. But now, for the first time, that line seemed blurry. Could it be possible that someone like her could actually cross over? That someone like her could matter to someone like him? As the clock ticked down to the end of her shift, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads. She had a choice to make, a decision that could change everything. But was she ready for it? Was she ready to step into a world where she didn't feel like an outsider? Or was this just another empty promise, another illusion of change? The answer seemed too big to grasp, and yet it was waiting for her just on the other side of that envelope. Lily didn't sleep much that night. The invitation from Calloway Enterprises sat on her kitchen counter, taunting her with its glossy paper and carefully worded promises. She had tossed and turned, her mind whirling with possibilities. Was it a mistake? Was she being set up for failure? Was this real? She had never imagined that something like this would happen to her. Someone like her. She was just a girl working 2 jobs, barely making ends meet, trying to stay afloat. Henry Calloway, a man of unimaginable wealth and influence, didn't know her. He couldn't. But then why had he reached out? Why had he paid attention? The morning came too soon, the gray light creeping through her curtains, and Lily found herself staring at the letter once more. She had avoided the thought for long enough. She had to know. She had to find out what he wanted. After a long, restless breakfast, she made the decision to go. She had no real reason not to. The worst that could happen was they'd laugh her out of the building. And that wasn't worse than staying stuck in this same life forever. Her nerves were a tight knot in her stomach as she stood in front of the glass doors of the Calloway Enterprises building. It was nothing like the cramped cafe or the dingy apartment she called home. This was something else entirely, sleek, modern, polished, a tower of glass and steel that seemed to touch the sky. For a moment, she wondered if she was even allowed inside, but she forced her feet to move. Inside was equally intimidating. The lobby was a bright, open space with marble floors, sleek metal accents, and lush plants lining the walls. She felt out of place the moment she walked in, as if she were an intruder. The receptionist, a well-dressed woman with perfectly done hair, looked up from her desk with a smile that seemed just a little too perfect. "Good morning, Miss McAllister. Mr. Calloway is expecting you. Right this way." Lily's heart beat harder. She had only been here for a minute, and already, she felt like everything she knew was slipping away. She followed the receptionist down a hallway, each step echoing louder than the last. Finally, the receptionist stopped in front of a tall wooden door and knocked twice. "Mr. Calloway," she said smoothly, "Miss McAllister is here." "Send her in," a voice answered from within. The receptionist smiled at Lily again, her lips tight, and opened the door for her. Inside, the office was more understated than Lily had expected, elegant but not ostentatious. The room was large, with a panoramic view of the city stretching out behind a giant glass window. A large desk sat in the center, polished and clean, and behind it sat Henry Calloway himself. Lily's breath caught in her throat. He looked just like he had on the street, but so different at the same time. Clean, sharp, confident. His eyes didn't hold the same weariness they had when he was sitting on the sidewalk. Instead, they were focused, intense, like he was watching her, studying her. "Miss McAllister, please," he said, gesturing to the seat across from his desk. Lily took a cautious step forward, her hands trembling as she sat down. She couldn't stop the nerves from overtaking her, but she tried to steady her breath. There was no turning back now. "Thank you for coming," Henry said, leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "I know this must feel strange to you. It's not every day that someone like me reaches out to someone like you." Lily couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. "Someone like me?" Henry smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "Someone who is doing their best, but has been overlooked by the world. Someone with potential, but no resources." Lily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I don't really understand. Why me? Why now?" Henry studied her for a moment, his gaze softening. "I've been following your story for some time, Lily. Your family, your background, your drive. I can see something in you that others overlook. I've watched you for years, in fact. Your mother worked for my family when she was young. I've always felt a certain connection to your family, even if you didn't know it." Lily's heart stopped for a moment. "My mother," she whispered. I didn't know." Henry nodded. "Your mother was a remarkable woman. She worked for us when she was your age, and she left an impact. I've been watching over your family since. And when I saw you struggling to make ends meet, I knew it was time to reach out." Lily couldn't process his words. She had grown up hearing little about her mother's past, mostly because her mother had never talked about it. She had always been the quiet, hard-working woman who kept things to herself. But now, it seemed like there was so much more to the story. Henry leaned forward, his voice soft. "I'm offering you a chance, Lily. This project, this opportunity, is about more than just a job. It's about giving someone like you a platform to do something meaningful. Something that will change your life." Lily could hardly breathe. She felt like the ground was slipping from under her. Could she really be part of this world? Could she truly escape her life, her struggles, and make something of herself? Or was this just another dream that would slip away? "I know it's a lot to take in," Henry continued, sensing her hesitation. "But think about it, Lily. This is your chance to step into a life you never thought possible." Lily's eyes darted around the room, her mind whirling. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions. She wanted to know how this could be real. She wanted to understand why she of all people was being chosen for this opportunity. But in the end, she knew there was only one thing she needed to say. I don't know if I'm ready," she said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Henry nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "That's all right. You don't have to be ready yet. But know this, Lily, you are worth this. You always have been." The weight of his words hung in the air as Lily sat there, uncertain, caught between two worlds. Was this real? Could she actually change her life? Lily's head spun as she walked out of the Calloway Enterprises building, the heavy glass doors closing softly behind her. The city outside seemed like a blur, its noise muted compared to the silence that filled her mind. She had expected an overwhelming sense of relief, maybe even excitement. But what she felt was a deep, aching uncertainty. The possibilities stretched out before her like an uncharted map, and she couldn't tell where any of the roads led. As she walked down the sidewalk, the letter Henry had given her sat heavy in her bag, pressing against her side. She had barely processed everything he had said to her. His words, so confident, so sure. You are worth this. But she didn't feel worth it. She didn't feel like she belonged in his world, not when she could barely pay her bills, not when her brother was lost to a life she couldn't pull him out of. She reached for her phone in her pocket, half tempted to call Noah. Maybe he would know what to say, maybe he would have some advice, even though she wasn't sure he was in the place to give it. The truth was, she didn't know what to do anymore. She felt like she was standing on the edge of something huge, but she couldn't bring herself to take the first step. Her phone buzzed in her hand and she glanced at it. It was a message from Noah. Her heart sank as she opened it. Can we talk? I need help. A sharp pang of guilt twisted in her chest. She hadn't seen him in weeks, not since their last argument. The one where he pushed her away, and she had been too tired to fight anymore. She had been avoiding him because she didn't know how to fix things. She didn't know how to save him from the mess he was in. Lily stopped walking and leaned against a nearby wall, her heart heavy. She wanted to help him. She always had. But how could she help him when she could barely help herself? How could she change her life when her family struggles were still so deeply rooted in her own heart? She stared at the message again, her fingers hovering over the keys. Then, without thinking, she typed out a response. I'm on my way. Let's talk. The moment she hit send, a sense of clarity settled over her. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know if she was ready for the job Henry had offered, or if she could step into a life that seemed so far out of reach. But what she did know was that she couldn't ignore the people she cared about anymore. She couldn't ignore Noah, and she couldn't ignore the chance to make a better life for herself. Not when she had a choice. With a deep breath, Lily tucked her phone away and turned to walk toward the subway station. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could face it. When she reached the platform, she didn't hesitate. She stepped onto the train, the city passing by outside the window. She didn't know where the tracks would take her, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to stand still anymore. The train rumbled along, taking her toward her brother, toward a conversation she hoped would finally bring them closer. But more than that, it was taking her toward herself, toward a life she was ready to shape, no matter how uncertain or difficult it seemed. And that was enough. For now, that was enough.